Hello, hello.
Hey.
This is another episode of Biweeklycasts. Why do I keep saying Biweeklycasts? It's a new episode of Biweeklycast in a series of Biweeklycasts. Let's put it this way. Your hosts are still the same. I'm Dima Malenko, engineer at Meta.
I'm Slava, CEO at Savvy.
Last time, even though it was kind of a while ago, we talked a little bit about productivity and delegation and using AI and different kinds of things to boost one's impact on this world. And in there was one thing that kind of crept in my mind, and I kept thinking about it. And I want to develop this thinking now. Would you guess what the idea is? Well,
kind of know.
I realized it's a mute question because you've seen the notes. Last time we discussed delegation and challenges of it, like when you delegate something to someone and you get something back, how do you establish that what you've got back is kind of good enough for you to use it, or for this thing to be fed into the next step of processes? And I think there are multiple different things and multiple different dimensions to this question, and this is what I wanted to explore.
Let's give it a try.
Let's establish, or try to establish, let's be more cautious and hedge some bets over here, kind of establish a framing for this. So the context would be, at least the starting context would be to look at the work we do as a process with a series of steps where where we have work unit, it gets some inputs, then it produces some outputs, and then those outputs serve as input to one or more subsequent steps of the process, and eventually the final step produces the result of the work, kind of the overall result that we are working, looking for, and what we would be trying to look at is that transition from one step of a process where one unit of work gets completed somehow by someone, and that output that is produced gets consumed by the next step.
I have a clarification here. When you speak about a process, does it mean something repetitive, or it means just a sequence of actions?
That is a great question. I think here I would mean process more as a sequence of steps, which may or may not be repetitive. I think the way I'm looking at it now in the context of this discussion would be to have steps that have some particular order and structure of how work flows from one piece of the process to the next, to the next, to the next.
Saying somebody drafts the text, then edits the text, then sends it for the visualization, and then it goes published, and it's basically a step-by-step thing.
Yes. That is a great example, and maybe this what you describe is maybe a more conventional thing. I would imagine, and I would think that same kind of pattern holds even if there is kind of one person doing thing. Maybe I don't know, like when I'm cooking something, I first kind of check that all the ingredients are available, then I dice them, then I kind of do whatever the recipe says. I'm still one executor, and kind of there are steps to the process that happens.
Man called me conventional, right? That's quite a conventional example as well.
That's right. I just, maybe my example was not exactly what I wanted to convey. I would rather, for now at least, start with looking at the process as a more kind of generic, like you said, sequence of actions that leads to kind of final output being produced by someone.
That is fair.
And I think important role in how processes like these are organized is the transition from output produced by one step for that output to serve as an input to the next step. And I guess maybe an example could be that when we publish episodes of our podcast, we have funny, well, I think of them as funny thumbnails for our episodes, where we pull kind of still frames from the video and kind of arrange them in a hopefully intriguing way. And then it is used for publishing the final episode. And we have a special designer, Alexandra, who helps us with that, and she does a great job. And kind of this is a distinct step of the process. But then when kind of several times we can have several versions or variants of the thumbnail produced before it is kind of approved or green lighted to be used in the next step of publishing process. And that thing how we transition from something, kind of I've produced, or something somewhere produced output, and we say, okay, it's good to go into the next step of the process, I think is a very, very important step. And we touched on it last time when we said that there may be this thing called verification text. When you delegate something to someone, be it AI or another person, you get the result back from them, and kind of how do you know that this result is trustworthy and you can use for whatever comes next for that result.
Mm-hmm.
Does this resonate as a concept? Like, kind of, does it make sense for you that kind of there is a little bit of distinction that I'm trying to draw between one work step producing an output, and before that output can serve as an input to the next thing, we kind of something needs to happen, and that output needs to be vetted or otherwise kind of green lighted?
It's kind of easier for me with multiple people. Mm-hmm. Like when you showed with the podcast example, when there is Alexandra and you basically have to do the transition, it seems a bit more organic. When I think about my own activities, even the complex ones, I think this review is a bit less obvious. I mean, I can make some checkpoints, but it's kind of not as obvious.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think this is a great illustration for one of the things I wanted to bring up. And and I will try to circle back to what you described just now, and you tell me if I'm doing a good job and if what I'm saying makes sense. So let's start with the end of quote unquote verification process. Like something kind of we say, oh, it's good. We trust that this is a reliable thing for us to use in whatever comes next. And I'm not sure if trust is the right word, but somehow I pulled it, and kind of this is what I use when I think about the quality of the output when it becomes the input for the next step. Like, do we trust this output? Do we trust it enough to carry forward? And if there is trust or confidence that is good enough, we can move forward. So kind of this is the tail end of verification process. And the way how we gained that trust to green light something to the next process can happen by different means. First simple thing can be like literal verification, like with example of thumbnails for our podcast episodes. I don't necessarily know, or nor do I care about how Alexandra, like what are the technical things that she uses to produce those things. I look at the thumbnail that I get and I say, yes, I like it. I think it will look great when I publish. Or maybe let's change this. Like maybe let's use different photos or something like this. So I look at this thing and I verify it, and I say like, yeah, it's good enough. Let's move forward. That's one possible way. Sometimes it's not. It's just plain not possible. We get output from someone, but just verifying the output can be as complex as doing the work in the first place. I don't know. An example could be I don't know, someone brings a strategy document to you. In order to determine if it's a good or bad strategy document, if we are good to start working on that strategy, we need to you almost need to redo the analysis and see like if you would come up with the same strategy. So kind of evaluating the doc or output this way before it goes forward might be unfeasible. And at that point, we can rely on different ways of gaining trust. And we kind of, in the first instance, we gain trust in the thing by verifying that the kind of correct important characteristics of the output. But then we can also rely on the process by which the output was produced. If we had a strategic session with all the relevant stakeholders and we had right facilitation and we did right things to ensure diversity and kind of ice breaking and nice flow of information, then the document that we've got in the end is likely trustworthy. Kind of if the process was done right, we can move forward. And another example, another variation of this can be, if a project, I don't know, a recommendation for something to me comes from Slava, I don't necessarily know the process that Slava arrived at this thing. I don't necessarily have a way to verify whether this recommendation is fine, but I trust Slava. And if he executed this process, I kind of trust the output of the work that he's done because he executed this thing. So we can gain trust in the output based on the credibility of the executor, and ultimately credible executor that we all interact with is ourselves, right? Like we trust, like if I did it, it must be right. So like this verification step gets a little bit blurred that way, but
I know this last one is a bit stretched.
You mean the executor or being trusting yourself?
I think you have to be quite confident to do that, like especially if you know that you didn't do all the steps you were meant to do, or you didn't do it thoroughly enough, then probably you're still in doubts, and that's not always true. You know how it was done, so you get the top information about it, but can you rely on it?
Well, I think what you're saying is a sign of you being very experienced and highly conscientious person, where you say that, yes, even though I know everything about the process, I kind of maybe can see that even the process itself executed by me is not kind of 100% bulletproof, and I need to judge the results with a grain of salt. But still, kind of there is this possibility. It's like if this is a good coffee because I brewed it, or something along those lines. I'm not insisting that this works all 100% of the time, but maybe this can be an example of this implicit trust in executor.
There is something that worries me in your examples. You used two terms, one that I totally understand. When you were describing the art and thumbnails for the podcast, you mentioned that you basically look at them whether you like them or not. Like It's not so much about trust, it's about like whether you accept them or you find them good enough. I really understand good enough and liking thing, but in terms of trust, my normal way of thinking about it is that if Alexandra created 5 good thumbnails in a row, you've collected enough good experiences, so you would be supposed to trust her, but you still look at the thumbnails, even though you trust that she's quite good, but you keep this judgment thing anyways. No matter how, like, even if she did 25 good thumbnails, you would still look into the thumbnails because it's your like face and reputation and it's your show. You want to have the final word, no matter how much you trust.
This is a great example, because I think this is great pointing at how complex and multifaceted this whole place is. And you're 100% right that kind of when you first start, let's say, working with someone, you first want to get the results, and then you look at the results and you check and double check them before they go forward, just to make sure that the process will execute successfully. But also by doing that, you build your trust in the process and executor of, like, in the procedure that was used to produce those results, and in executor of that procedure, so that at later stages that it is entirely possible that you will do a little bit less of, let's say, validation and checking yourself, but just trusting, no, kind of, we already have established standards and kind of everything around it. We don't need to check. And it totally works like that with Alexandra and the thumbnails. We do, like, where because the process is relatively manual. It's not that Alexandra produces the thumbnail and it gets automatically published. It gets back to me and I publish it, so I can't help but look at it and maybe ask for some corrections. Or kind of more often than not now, I do not plan for any kind of extra time for editing, for doing iterations on those thumbnails, because we established the process and there is high degree of trust that we will nail it on the first try.
So basically what you're saying is that the nature of this example is like that. So you basically have to review it because you are the one who takes the next step and you take the picture and you upload it.
Right. It is not. Yeah, it just happens by the way of how the process works, but it is not necessarily a formal reviewing process. And now that there is no kind of even time buffer planned for handling maybe, like, quote unquote negative outcomes of that review.
A difference between formal and informal reviewing process.
I think there is. I think maybe a formal process accounts a little bit more and explicitly for different possible outcomes. Like, what if the verification, quote unquote, fails? Like, what we do in that case? How do we correct it? And kind of what are the affordances around this step to still allow us to hit the ultimate goals of the entire process. Whereas implicit, it may be, like, I've got something and I may be not fully liking it, but I'm not really sure how to correct it or kind of get what I really want.
All right, that makes sense. Should we move on?
And I think kind of the reason why I think it is important is kind of to understand how, when we decompose the big work into smaller steps and we get outputs of those smaller steps, how do we kind of chain them together and ensure that we get the right proper outputs of each individual step to get the final result that we are looking. It is important to understand means by which we can verify those different outputs, and these means can be different in different situations, and what is available to us can depend on the nature of the task. Like, we've beaten to death this example with podcast thumbnails. You can look at podcast thumbnail and determine if it possesses the qualities you are looking for in that kind of outputs for this to go forward. In some other cases, these kind of verifying or getting trust in the output might not be available by the sheer nature of the work being done. For example, like when here in Britain, when you buy a house, the normal thing you do, you order a survey to assess the state of the building, the kind of risks of flooding, whatever else it might be, and you get a report. and you kind of take it for granted, right? You cannot necessarily verify that this report is accurate and you are good to proceed to the next step of a process.
It's quite a bad example. I have a civil engineering degree, so I would hesitate a bit if I got a report and I would see something that doesn't make much sense there. So there is still a validation stage there.
Well, but how would you know that? Maybe I'm a little bit far from from that line of work. But if the report says that like everything's good, no problems to report, like how do I validate that short of kind of
the
doing
reports
the
normally have
inspection?
the data points and interpretations. So like if you read just the interpretations part, then yes.
Right. That's right. And I think that kind of hopefully illustrates the point I was trying to get to, that in these situations where we cannot, that's also interesting, because here one might say that the purpose of this step is to have kind of yes or no, kind of good to go, not good to go on buying decision, and we arrive at that determination by means of using survey report. But by itself, survey report we get from third party. How do we check that the report makes sense? And then there, you're right, we probably can assess the format of the report, that kind of if there is a conclusion, are there supporting points to the report, but also we gain trust in this thing through other means, through means other than just looking at the report. We probably ordered the survey from hopefully established and certified firm, done by a certified professional, and we kind of sort of hopefully trust the process that they've been using, and it increases
Let's
our
be honest,
credence.
we just checked Google reviews and that was probably tops.
Well, but that's a little bit of kind of goes a little bit towards establishing trust in the kind of procedure that is used, because I imagine those procedures must be standardized or something, maybe not, but let's hope they are. And also building a little bit of trust in executor by checking the previous work or what other people think of them. And when you deal with work items like this, you have to plan your processes, including process of delegation, accordingly to make sure that there is a room and there are necessary elements that allow you or someone else to determine that the output produced is trustworthy, good enough for us to be used, for this thing to be used at the next step of the process.
All right. Why is it important for people to distinguish those?
I think depending on the specific thing we are trying to achieve with organizing our work, being delegation or just ensuring quality of the process, understanding this helps us do things better or more effectively. And an example could be that, right, like we are, let's say, a software development shop. We have some kind of process that we follow, and we have kind of junior professionals joining us. Of course, on day one, we cannot expect them to be able to do kind of this whole kind of deliver entire projects by themselves. They need to start somewhere before we can kind of both gain trust in them, and then in the outputs that they produce, so that we can kind of charge our clients money for that. And the way we get them on that path, we probably give them simpler tasks. We validate, we embed them in real projects and let them produce intermediate results, which are then scrupulously validated and stuff like that. So like first we get, let's say, the value they deliver is we check that value by checking the output or verifying the output that they produce, and then eventually we start trusting them more with kind of having their own judgment, and kind of we shift when working with them, we shift mode of operation from verifying every output that they produce into, oh, we trust that you are proficient enough with this part of this area of our work, so we can kind of trust you that you would do right things, or follow the procedures successfully to produce the right results. And kind of the next level, it can progress to where we can even trust you not only to follow the procedures, but also to define procedures or deviate from procedures when you think that there are circumstances that warrant that, and you kind of we shift how a person as an executor is embedded into overall process based on kind of level of trust and how we establish trust in the outputs they produce.
But still, like, we circled back to my question, like why people have to keep it in mind, because it seems very natural, like things that you describe, like, yeah, I trust the person, I will not double check. Like, I don't trust the person, I will probably want to check the outputs. It comes very organic. Like, why people should keep it in mind or just be aware about it?
It is a good question. I think that my answer to this would be that it's a good one. Depending on what is it that we are trying to achieve, certain mode of operation or organizing our process would be, certain ways would be more optimal than others, right? If we can have trust in, let's say, we can trust outputs because we trust the process that produces these outputs. We can skip or have very lightweight verification steps at the output of that process, and that would allow us to make things more effectively and optimize kind of economic ROI equation for the process that we deal with. But transition between these different modes of trust in the output of different steps of the process requires our understanding how that trust is established and how to move from one form of trust to another form of trust, or if certain things are impossible at all, how to compensate for that by organizing process in a different way.
May I suggest an example?
Of course.
You brought up a strategic report previously. So saying we have to look at 3 sections of the analytical report. There would be finance, and the financial report is structured and processed. So it's basically just a yearly thing of the thing that we do every month. And we've checked it so many times that we trust the process, and we just automatically accept whatever is in the financial part because it's been reliable for years. There is no reason to think it's not reliable now. And then there are 2 custom reports, one from manager A and the other from manager B. I may trust manager A, but this manager has never done any reports like that. So I would still have to verify and double check, like no matter how much I trust the person, I haven't seen this person doing this thing previously. So my trust level would be moderate. I wouldn't have to micromanage it completely, but I would still have to give it a look. And then the manager B, who has done reports like that previously, I will probably just like look through the thing and attach it for all the team to discover. And knowing the difference of where my trust goes and what are the methods of verification, I could decide like which of these reports should be checked by how much time, what frequency, what method, etc.
Right. Yeah, basically that's it. And if we are talking about kind of maybe different modes of automation, or like in your case of delegation, understanding where how trust in the output is going to be established is going to inform how the preceding steps of the process will be done. And an example, maybe naive, with the financial report that you referred to, could be, imagine like many years ago, like really many years ago, before computers, Excel, and kind of similar things, companies would still produce financial reports, right? They maybe would be printed on the typewriter or something like this, in a lot less automated fashion that we have now. I imagine at that day and age, you would want to check that kind of the math on the report works, or kind of someone cross-check that. But then if we are using different process now, and if someone sends you an Excel report rather than something printed somewhere, you can almost skip this step of verifying the math correctness of the report and look at the bigger picture, and kind of knowing how to deal with this stuff kind of helps us organize the process. So if you ask some sort of AI assistant, ChatGPT, or even like Claude Code or Codex to produce this report, I imagine that you would, well, I would hope / expect that you would put such report under a lot of scrutiny to verify that it used correct methodology, that the numbers add up and things. No, you're like, whatever, like numbers are there. There you go.
Like 20% is 20%. What do you do?
Well, I guess 20% is 20%. That's a good rationale.
There a difference between. I keep thinking about this as success criteria, like success criteria for people and for automated kind of work. Because I think that you kind of made a distinction twice during our conversation, that like for delegation it works one way and for automation it works a bit differently. Or did I get it wrong?
No, maybe the examples were like this. I think it's probably kind of conceptually works the same way, I would want to say, for delegation, automation, maybe contingent on, again, depending on the kind of automation you are using, on how the deterministic or indeterministic process is. Because if we have, I don't know, like insurance premium estimate, which has relatively, the way I understand it anyway, relatively strict standards for how, let's say, car insurance premiums are calculated based on the age of the car, the kind of mileage and size of an engine and stuff like that. So kind of that kind of automation, you kind of get the inputs, it does the calculation, it spits out the result, and it is deterministic.
It's a very specific one. Like if, let's say, I have a GPT agent for writing case studies from the interviews, and after every case study, I tweak the prompt a bit, and then I tweak it often enough to make it close to perfect, so I don't have to edit things after anymore. And after 5 or 6 reviews, when I see that, yeah, that's exactly the way I wanted, I probably will read it less thoroughly and then less thoroughly, and one day I will not read it anyway.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And I think like this would be an example that is in a sense close to delegation, because this is where how like in the big scheme of things you would work with someone you first start working on kind of delegating tasks to. You would, with the exception, or maybe not exception, but kind of, again, in case of GPT, there would be a similarity, that you would anyway start with some sort of guidance or instruction or procedure description that you would both ask AI agent to follow or your kind of fellow partner on the project to follow, or you agree to follow a particular procedure to kind of jumpstart initial result, kind of producing
Maybe
initial
not
output
necessarily
and
the
save on the
procedure, but
iteration.
things that success criteria, they usually go with definition of done. So what you're trying to shape is the definition of done, and how it is done is a bit less relevant.
Yes and no. I imagine situations where the process or following procedure is kind of important. Like, I don't know, like if I book my car for a scheduled service, there is a procedure that is supposed to be carried out. So it's not enough to have car being kind of put on the output parking lot
Okay.
with the
Here
documentation
comes
on it printed.
Dima, the micromanager. Yeah.
Well, yes.
Yes, and I'm proud of it. Yep.
Right, because then kind of subsequent steps of the process kind of rely on the maintenance to be carried out in accordance with all the required steps in the big scheme of things.
All right. Is there anything else you wanted to put around this trust and process thing?
No, I think we've covered it all. I just wanted to kind of, with all this, maybe hopefully not too circling, hopefully maybe sort of not too long to articulate the idea that kind of when we decompose longer work into a series of steps, these steps produce intermediate results, and we need to have to understand and have means of controlling and establishing kind of trust in those intermediate results. This trust can be gained by different ways, and understanding those ways and what's feasible and not feasible helps us shape overall process more effectively.
And you basically named things like quick reviews or quick checks, full trust to the process, full trust to the executor, like the person who does.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe some other extra validation things like Google reviews.
Yeah, that too. And of course, it is a little bit not difficult, but challenging to talk about this because there are so many dimensions to this. Like, remember your question initially, where it's like, are you talking about repeated process or series of steps? And I said, like, let's look at series of steps. But then implicitly throughout the conversations, we moved into a territory of repeated processes, and that adds dimension to it, because like when you're doing something once, you may be fine with just doing thorough validation, which maybe takes longer and requires more effort, as opposed if you do things multiple times, you want to be more effective, and then you shift sources of trust to different means. Maybe we trust the process, or establish that whoever is executing the process can be trusted. They understand important parameters of the output, and we can trust them that they can hit those parameters with the work they do.
Would be your like one highlight or biggest takeaway from this conversation?
I think it would be still kind of circling back to our previous discussion about delegation, and kind of maybe hoping that AI automagically is going to make us very productive. I think maybe not. You need to understand where the productivity comes from, and if you try to employ AI or your fellow human beings to do work for you, you need to understand how to incorporate results of their work into the bigger picture outputs that you are driving, and how to use that effectively.
In my case, you kind of highlighted for me that I keep circling back to people management a lot, like to the delegating people and people management practice. So probably I would have to look into the differences between automated and people-driven processes and what would be the different principles of managing those. That's a curious area, I think.
And yeah, this is an interesting area indeed. Maybe we'll talk about it someday.
Or not.
Who knows?
We'll see. Yeah. But we'll see that in a few weeks.
Hopefully in a couple of good weeks.
Good weeks.